I think it's completely reasonable to say that we would pursue some kind of arrangement with our neighbours in Europe to try to better manage our border situation and asylum journeys to the UK, because at the moment we don't have any kind of real cooperation across the EU. And we have, as we all see and hear about every single day, complete chaos and disastrous and often deadly chaos, actually, for the people who are making those extremely dangerous journeys. So I do think that it is vital that this government or any future Labour government takes a grown-up approach to sharing responsibility across Europe and providing alternatives to the smuggling gangs for people who are making those journeys. On the other hand, I do have serious concerns about any proposal to process claims offshore. As has been said, we don't really know what that looks like. We don't know what conditions would be like for people. We don't know what kind of oversight the British public would have of decision making, of conditions, of appeal rights, of all sorts of different complex areas of this system. So I'm very much of the opinion that we should run an efficient, credible, and humane asylum system on British soil. I do think that it makes sense to cooperate across Europe in order to ensure that journeys are made safely and without enriching criminal gangs.
So that's really interesting. I just sort of asked you because there's another story about asylum in the news today. I find myself asking, what is the story in Balamory, as my children would say? In fact, the story in Balamory, which is the Isle of Mull, is that Tony Blair back in 2003 wanted to create an asylum claim processing centre on the Isle of Mull. You obviously, Zoe, have some concerns about offshore processing now, the official policy not just of the government, but we believe of the Labour Party as well. Would you be in favour of an offshore or an onshore processing centre somewhere like the Isle of Mull? Do you think that's a reasonable solution to try and cut down on these factors, these pull factors that bring people to the UK?
Well, I think that it's clear that the Tony Blair's government examined that proposal, found that it would be totally unlawful and unworkable, and dismissed it. And that's what should be happening now. But I think it points to a wider problem that we have, which is that for decades, across both of the major parties, we've had this consensus that there's, and you've talked about it a lot already, that there's some kind of impact we can have on the supposed pull factor when all the evidence, all the research, all the credible studies into this matter find that the true pull factors are the community ties that people have to the UK, because we are a country with massive links to countries around the world. They are the perceived safety and prosperity of the UK, which again, not things that we can change through harsher immigration policies. And what Tony Blair did do, even though he didn't set up his supposedly considered internment camp on the Isle of Mull, he did slash the payments that were given to asylum seekers. He slashed the length of time that the grant of leave for refugees was given. He reduced appeal rights for people seeking asylum in the country, and all with the exact same logic as we hear today, that if we're harsher, then people will stop coming. And I'm afraid the evidence has shown us that after decades of trying that, it doesn't work. And an honest government would say, hey, how about this? We know that there's a certain number of people who will always seek safety in the UK, that none of the decades of hostility have ever made any kind of dent in the numbers of people who do it. It's a manageable number of people. We will make it work. We will make it safe. We will invest in our communities so that they are able to support those people. Wouldn't that be refreshing?
Right. Well, you've heard it from Zoe there, Mike. Apparently, the government's completely wrong. We need to set ourselves up as the land of milk and honey, and that will bring asylum down because being tough doesn't work. Apparently, things like offshore processing, by the way, it worked when it was tried in Australia, cutting people's benefits won't work. Mike, what do you think the solution is?
Sorry, if I could just say, if you go
In
to
Amer
Australia today, where they did offshore processing, they're still having the same debate about asylum seekers coming there. They still have as people seeking asylum in Australia.
but
It did
Zoe,
not
it
prevent.
did deal with the boat problem they have. Mike, what do you think the answer should be? Apparently, we should be softer, not tougher.
Well, I mean, offshoring could potentially work if you deport in sufficient numbers, and it makes it economically irrational to come here illegally. The Australian case has proven that. Um, Tough policies work for various countries. They work for Singapore. They work for Japan. They're beginning to work for Denmark. The UK does not have a tough policy. We have a legal architecture that makes it very difficult to detain and deport illegals who enter the country. Once that legal architecture, and yes, that includes the Human Rights Act, is amended or possibly abolished, then we can begin the process of properly policing our borders.
And Mike, you've been quite vocal today in the press as an organisation slamming this policy from the Labour Party. I agree with you, by the way. It strikes me as complete and utter nonsense, but I would say that. I'm a Tory MP. But you've also in the past been quite vocal about criticising the government. You have an equal opportunities policy when it comes to criticising political parties on their immigration policy. Is there an answer to this? It's clear that no one really has faith in what either political party is trying to do at Migration Watch. What would your solution be?
Well, I mean, the past decade or so, we've actually been more critical of the Conservative Party than Labour. And the Conservatives have failed to deliver their promises on both legal and illegal migration. I mean, the solution is to get to the root cause of the problem. And again, that's the sort of web of conventions, humanitarian conventions and laws which we've imposed upon the country. And essentially that works as a straitjacket. It's very, very difficult for the Home Office to enforce the rule of law. Other countries don't have those barriers. Yes, we can be generous. We can provide safe routes for people such as the Ukrainians who've come here in large numbers. But ultimately, you need to get a grip on the channel crossings, and you need to bring legal migration down to sustainable levels. And legal migration doesn't require a rejigging of the legal framework. The Conservative Party could reduce those numbers quite quickly.
But I hear that we've done rather well, slightly naughtily maybe, but I hear the Home Secretary's done rather well at bringing illegal migration down, but specifically over Christmas Eve, Christmas Day and Boxing Day. We had exactly 0 people cross the Channel illegally. Is that Home Office policy that delivered that welcome break in the small boat crossings? I'm trying hard not to grin.
Those are the weather conditions.
Right. Okay. Well, I see that Nigel Farage described him not being James Cleverly as being James something else. But we'll give poor old James a bit of a break. Zoe, right. So apparently all these international conventions like the ECHR, the Refugee Convention, apparently the only way we can deal with it is to leave them. I've always been a believer, actually, in having a British Bill of Rights, which would mirror many of the clauses in the ECHR. I just think it would be better for our nation. But do you think Britain can be credible on the global stage, Zoe, if it leaves these international rule of law agreements?
No, I don't think we can. And I think that it's important to be honest, that it's not just one easy convention here or a law we can shift there. The principles of protecting people from being sent back to a country where their life is in danger is part of customary international law. So there's no single convention that you could leave, although you could try by leaving, the Convention Against Torture, the Refugee Convention, the Convention Against Trafficking, the Convention on the Rights of the Child. I could go on. You could try leaving all of those. It would still be wrong to send anybody back to a situation of danger. And that's why this is a bit more
they're not in a situation of danger in France, though, Zoe, are they? There's no such thing as an asylum seeker from France because they're safe as soon as they arrive in France, surely.
Well, they're safe before they arrive in France, if they're by that metric, because they're not at war in Italy either. But I don't think we would be credible in our conversation if we said, no, everybody should stay on the island of Lampedusa. It's just not possible, is it?
Well, I don't know, because Zoe, I just take you back to that.
It's not credible to say to them that they have to deal with all of this. We have to be like grown-ups in this conversation and say we'll share responsibility.